this because it's going to be, right? Because it'll, or should I just leave the window open?
I would keep no, but as long as you.
It's delayed though. It's going to be,
Oh, yeah, you can actually. I'm sorry.
right? I can exit out of here, right? Because I'm running live.
I believe
'Cause
so.
it'll-
I always check.
Okay. I'm streaming live on YouTube, so we're good to go, Madam Chair.
And we're recording too?
And we're recording.
Excellent. That was pretty smooth. All right, I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. We got all board members present except for Rachel, who's running a little bit late. She'll be here shortly. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda?
Jenny, I'll make that
I'll
motion.
second.
Motion by Jenny, second by Corey. We'll move to a roll call vote.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Seguin,
Aye.
Mr. Gearke,
Aye.
Ms. Roser, Mr. Black,
Aye.
Ms. Rosenau.
Aye.
All right, we have an approved agenda. First item is our work session. And the first item on the list of topics for tonight's work session is our school board listening session, which took place last week.
Yep, we
watched it.
facilitated a work session, a listening session actually last Monday, the 15th of March. We had Rachel actually chaired it up, and I know that it was Rachel, Jim, and Jenny that were there as board members. Had a considerable, well, we had three major topics that we were going to discuss, and we or kind of listened to folks. We had budget reductions. We had a potential levy referendum in the fall, and then we also talked about is our current COVID situation with regards to school. Jenny did a great job facilitating. We had about, Paul, I'm not sure, Paul, how many we had. We had anywhere from 10 to 15 people on the meeting. If I'm correct there
I think in total with everyone, yes, that's correct.
about that. I'd have to say the lion majority of the time was in reductions.
Yes.
And then that created, just again, kind of some good overarching questions that kind of led into other topics. Was we realized you've been fiscally making the right decisions, tightening the belt when needed to. We talked about the reason why, mainly enrollment, as enrollment drives that revenue portion of it, the significant portion of the revenue of the agenda or of the budget. And they just had a lot of questions about just in general, you know, how much have we reduced over the last 3 years actually. And
Well, good.
fielded all of those questions. I know Rachel and Jenny and Jim can share what you remember from the listening session. It went right to an hour. Time managed perfectly. I don't
Good,
know if
yeah, I
anybody-
watched it. I mean, I think it was, I mean, I'll let you guys who are there kind of chime in a little bit. too,
There was
but-
very specific questions that we really couldn't answer about making cuts, you know.
Sure.
The specific, you know, who is gonna get cut, what jobs are we cutting? And it was
Right.
just kind of a little too much for, I think, what we were prepared to answer right at the time, so.
and
But
what-
that leads into, you know, if we want to make cuts or we don't want to make cuts, do we need the levy or do we not need the levy? So it kind of, it was more about those two topics from what I remember than COVID, so.
Good.
Yeah, very, very little on COVID. You know, I think Jim and Matt summarized it well, you know, a lot of concern around the cuts and how it's going to impact our school, you know, our staff, our students. I thought they were really good questions. And I think, like you said, it led to some greater discussion after the meeting as well, where
Yes.
you were able to expand, you know, and I think that's always good to know it's an option, you know, that if you have more questions that we can't answer, you know, there, then, you know, let's have that dialogue too. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was great. I thought, you know, the questions were great. I think there were a lot of questions that, you know, were expected. They have been asked, you know, the community's been asking them. So there weren't surprise questions.
Sure,
But overall, good.
good.
Rachel, I don't know if you want to,
No, I think you guys covered it.
Okay.
I liked it.
Is there any way for us to tell, maybe this is a question for Paul, but we know how many, 15 or so were there, which is a pretty small number, I would say. Is there any way for us to tell how many watched it afterwards? Like, do we keep track of that? Because it was recorded, correct?
It was recorded and we also streamed it. So, and it was all totally virtual.
Sure.
So,
I'm just out of curiosity, how many people are actually taking advantage of the fact that we've got them? Something that we should probably keep track of going forward, right?
yeah, I mean, one of the, and maybe Paul, you can, I don't know if you remember, I think I'd asked you how many watched it on YouTube, or when do you, sometimes it's streaming it, they kind of watch it for a while and then they're off it,
Yeah.
and on and off. I'm not sure, Paul, if you have any of that.
Yeah, I was watching it throughout the meeting. The number fluctuated between 6 and 8 who were watching at any given time. And if you give me a minute, I can find the number of views we have on YouTube after the fact too.
Okay.
So I'll get back to you in a second on that.
No worries. It wasn't an immediate, I didn't need it. It's just more of a general theme. I think that's a good
The
thing for us to
listening
kind of keep
session.
track of, to see what topics are bringing up the most people and how
Right.
the level of participation. It's just good data, I think.
yeah, I
we-
agree.
Jackson just showed me at 77 views.
70, see, Jackson beat you to it, Paul.
The
No
only,
surprise.
the only thing I would say is that during the meeting, some of the parents didn't understand that there was 2 separate links. And so I was getting questions text to me because they didn't realize they couldn't ask it from the YouTube link, even though it said it in your email. I think sometimes as parents, we get overloaded, we just see the link and we're like, okay, and we move on, and then we come back to it when we need it. We tried to clarify that at the beginning of the meeting as well, so maybe it is just best to let everybody have access to that Zoom link. And they may not plan on speaking, but eventually a question may come up, and then they're like, oh, well, now I can't ask it. And that was the only recommendation I would have from how we did in this past time, to just improve that access to the board.
Sure, and we can, easily, I think we can, I'd have to look up our account with Zoom, what the school has, but we do have a limit. I know through Google Meets, we have 250, I know that, but I don't know if it's 100 or 150, easily could have accommodated the 77 views.
Sure.
The thing that I would have to set up on a listening session that's a little bit different is just the managing of the meeting. I don't want to have to hit admit to every one
Yeah.
that wanted in, so I'd have to I can do that. I
Yeah.
think we could do that in the future. The other thing that it did, a really good question, I had two other things that I wanted to just broach is, I had, some of the questions came in and some comments came in via the chat. So we articulated those as well and went through that piece. So I think both venues were working pretty well for the participants. But I happened to have an offline conversation with one of the parents that was part of the listening session, and it was a great conversation. Just, it gave me the opportunity to have a little bit more time with that person about some of the specific positions within the district that were being viewed as potential reductions. And it was very enlightening for her. She did not realize the whole budgetary side of it and the revenue side of it and things like that. So that was good. And then a really good question that came up is, well, when are we going to get to a point where we don't need to reduce anymore? And when we don't necessarily, we control our deficit spending, but we don't have to do these cuts every year. And that was a great question that, to Jim's point, that transitioned into preliminary discussion that the board is having about an operating levy. And quite frankly, it's really continued work from the state. That's the
Right.
lion's share of our funding comes from the state. So, but it was a good question, and hopefully we'll continue to work on that.
Sure. Good. Thanks, you guys, for doing it. Sounds like it was a good. All right, next item, we've got a couple policies that Matt will walk through.
Actually, I have 4 policies that we'll start with a 2-read this tonight. The first policy is policy number 613, graduation requirements. On the first page, you just have dated language that refers back to old school years that just needed to be cleaned up and removed. On the second page of policy 613, key piece there is that under Article 5, letter A, the new letter A, and that's a process that we will continue to develop. As you'll see verbiage in there, continuous development of and growth in requisite knowledge and skills and analysis. It basically talks about the whole college. Came out of legislature about 2 years ago on college and career readiness and what secondary schools need to do to prepare for that. So that's why that is new language that's in there. And then on the last page, the students' progress towards college and career readiness are recorded on the school's transcript. We're going to make sure that we review that and make sure, and that's an easy fix. It's just how each local district decides to show what is preparation for college and career readiness. Probably for about 80% of our students, the ACT is the perfect example to be able to articulate that as well. And then we didn't go into, there's a note there under graduation requirements where we just have in there per the high school registration guide. We don't go into at policy level, we don't go into, you have to have so many in the fine arts and so many in math and science and social. That all just gets referred to that registration guide. And that's it for policy 613 under graduation requirements. You can see that this gets reviewed a lot. And we just, from sometimes legislation just doesn't know what the impacts will have on particular school district policies. So as you can see, we've had a lot of reviews of that policy. The second policy I want to look at is policies. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there any questions with policy 613? Okay. The second policy is 614. This is school district testing plan and procedures. In fact, we actually have two, 614 and 614F. 614F speaks to the security portion of it. But I wanted to call your attention to page 6. Just some additional tracking information. And then a broader communication on the school district website with regards to how we test. Page 4, these are additional steps of distributing test materials, just making sure that we do that correctly. So there's a chain of custody and addresses, the process of providing test materials. And this is really for if there is any kind of an investigation that's required, they'll be able to check back and basically trace who was involved in what part of the process there. So it's just updated pieces there. We do complete, we make sure that we will have, I'll review with principals again coming into next year, that we include this, the guide and the refusal of student participation in statewide testing in the student handbooks of each of the schools that we have. Then on page 10, a few other additional changes there. It was same as I mentioned in a previous part of the portion of the document, the students who tested and who are test monitored. Any person with access to testing materials, you have to read and complete the assurance of test security and non-disclosure. We do that on page 12. And then page 13 speaks to guidance on electronic device security. Obviously, we have a number of students, even down into the younger grades, that have electronic devices, and we got to make sure that that's done appropriately too. And then on the last one is on page 14, just talks about record keeping and what's required of the testing plan and procedure. Any questions with 614? It's a beefy policy. It's a lot of pages, but we get through it pretty well.
No questions for me.
Okay. Oh, gee, I'm sorry. Just yell at me.
You're busy, I don't know.
That works. Sorry about that.
Fixed it.
Okay, the next is that, as I referred to, is a policy 614F, and this is the district test security procedures. I've changed some things because we don't have a director of teaching and learning right now. We'll go to a district assessment coordinator that will be identified. That's through a majority of this policy is really that piece, and then the added forms at the end of the policy. There are 2 Minnesota Department of Education documents that have been added, the assurance of test security and non-disclosure, and the test administration report. So we just made that as part of the policy in 614F. Any questions with policy 614? All right, moving right along. We have policy 615, which is testing accommodations, modifications and exemptions for IEPs, section 504 plans, and LEP students. Multiple changes here. We all are either going to be or have worked, and it was some removed of some dated language on page 1 and some additional language on page 1 under purpose. You can see that there's quite a bit of removal of old language and then followed up by just new underscored language, moving from the deleted portion of under general statement of policy A to another new statement policy under A, which is per the requirements. Talks about all of that on page 3 as well. These are our English language learners and students that are on IEPs as well. Additional security that's added and language that is added there. And that's the main piece of the major changes was under just the general statement of purpose. There's one piece, if you see under Article 4, there's just new language because those are the newly updated, the most recent updated guidelines in the procedures manual for the Minnesota assessments is the 2017-18 guidelines for administration of accommodations and linguistic supports. So this gives us just new guidance on how we have to administer the MCAs with students that are on IEPs, are on 504s, and are English language learners. Any questions with the accommodations for testing policy 615? Okay, and the last policy is really, it's policy 619, staff development for standards. And I reviewed this with our special ed coordinator. It's on page 2. It's the last paragraph of section A. And we do that with regards to paraprofessionals providing support, special education students and student districts will ensure that annual training and opportunities that are required are accessible. So when we do that, usually at the beginning of the school year. And those are all the policies or that would require a board to facilitate 2 reads this month and next. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't.
No.
Pretty straightforward, nothing major, drastic changes, just making sure that we comply
Yep.
with the updated guidelines.
All right, so those are on tonight's agenda. Along with the first read ones. Okay, let's move on. The third topic on work session is the COVID-19 update. We can talk about contact tracing and vaccines.
Yeah, we had a busy week last week over the weekend. We had, and we kind of expected this to happen. Once we'd gotten our secondary students back in person, it's a little bit trickier, but we actually had all 3 buildings were affected by cases. We've concluded that none of them we don't have any that are school transmission. They're school related because it obviously involved a student that was at one point or another could have been positive and that we had to facilitate contact tracing. We had a number of grades that were quarantined, or excuse me, not grades, classrooms that were quarantined, and a number of secondary students too as well. So it's a little bit of an uptick, manageable. Definitely, I think that Tina and her crew are doing a really good job trying to stay on top of it, but there were a lot of moving parts this week. And the volume of tracking it was getting a little bit, little extensive, but definitely manageable. So, and it's nothing unusual. I think other districts are experiencing the same. We're starting to even see at the state level just a little bit of an uptick, and we don't know if it's related to the variant that became a cluster in Carver County. We do know that the variant is in Wright County, but it seems to be, at least right now, relatively low. So we're just making sure that we do our due diligence to continue on. We had a little bit quieter week. Well, this week, a quieter start to the week, but it's Monday. So our hope is that we can keep it manageable. So we're moving through the process, but it's, invariably what they're seeing, the variants, at least from the Department of Health standards, or their view is they're seeing the variant is more susceptible within youth sports. So we're just we're working closely with our coaches and try to make sure that we're as diligent as we possibly can. This is kind of it's a critical time. We're coming into post-secondary, playoff time, section play, and eventually here we're into state play here soon. So we just got to be really careful. But we did have a team that had to quarantine. Other than that, vaccines are just good news. We're progressing from our staff level. Next week, that's when those folks that had the Moderna vaccine will get their second dose next week. They could, it's during spring break. Some probably might wait, and that's okay. But we're getting a critical mass of people that I believe we're almost all there. I don't track it. As a district, we don't track it, but I'm basically, from our latest survey, is very small percentage of people that don't have their first shot that want the vaccine that's in the school setting. So
That's good.
yeah, very, very good news there. So other than that, I don't have any other updates unless board members have questions about. I know I keep you.
For teachers or staff that didn't sign up for the first round, are they still able to
Yes.
through the school? Okay, so
They
that's
can't-
still offer.
Yeah, the county facilitates all of this. So if you initially said, I'm interested, but that week comes around and you couldn't do it for whatever reason, whatever the case may be, they automatically keep sending you emails.
What if you said you're not interested? What if you become interested?
Then you just sign up on the link.
Okay,
It's open anytime and they'll continue to do that. They had a number of people that thought they'd want to wait a little bit and
Yep.
were interested, then they can just go to that link. Plus, we give our staff members have a link to any questions at all. They can send that right to a Wright County link that they can get answered.
okay.
So it was nice. It was, we did it in, I think the county is doing it in 2 sites. There's a drive-through at in Buffalo, and then they have been fortunate enough to, there's a big dome in St. Michael Albertville School District right by their high school.
Mhm.
And that's been a testing or a vaccine distribution site as well. So
Great.
good things. We're getting shots in arms of those people that want it, and that's the most important piece.
That's great. Good to hear. Okay, any other questions for Matt on COVID-19? Not, we'll move on. The next update is our committee updates. We've got a couple different updates here. Why don't we go ahead and start with our student school board reps? Hey, John. Hey, Bridget.
Hi. Sorry. So I'll start off, John, I guess. So, essentially we went through the surveys again, and we didn't, like graph them, but we, found our interesting trends. So I'm going to talk about the masks. So essentially what happened with masks is that, kids, and it was seen like the 2nd through
This is-
12,
this
but
is
it
the
became
7
pretty
through 12. Yeah, this is
7 through 12, but we saw it a little bit in 2nd and 3rd and 4th and stuff, that kids didn't really care as much about masks. And as we got older, 7th and 8th graders, they kind of cared, but as you got older and older, there was a lot of like 1s and 2s out of a scale of 5, which we kind of thought was interesting because younger kids didn't really seem to notice or care. And then also there were some actually 5s, because there were a couple of kids as you got like 11th and 12th grade that were like, yeah, because it's protecting me and my family, and like I get annoyed at kids that don't wear them properly. And that was the reason why some kids actually claimed that they didn't like being in person, is because of irresponsibility with masks. So that was interesting. And then the other thing that we noticed was that just kids being in school in general, as they get older with cheating, they it became very popular in 10th, 11th, 12th, 7, 8, 9. There were yeses, of course, but there were also a lot of no's. As you got older, there was over 90% were yeses. So it became really, really popular with upperclassmen. And it seemed like a lot of kids knew that it was better for them to be in school, but they didn't like being in school. So even if kids prefer to be at home, they knew it was better for them to be in school because they're more productive. So yeah.
Yeah. For the cheating, just so we didn't pick any specific classes. We kind of just went from class to class. So all of these surveys could just be regular classes as well as advanced classes, which is kind of just interesting to know just the whole trend of all the school, I guess. So as you got into the higher grades, kids, so, we saw the graphs where in the younger grades where kids loved being in school. Like it was 5s, and it's the same as you got older, but the amount of 5s and 4s actually starts to diminish as you get into the higher grades for being in school. And like Bridget was saying, the reason for that is because they recognize, like we have like a little response thing at the very bottom to say what they think and thoughts and whatever. They recognize that they do better in school and they learn more at school, but the convenience and leniency and stuff of that of being at home, when you can get done faster, it's a little bit easier, is very enticing. So you actually see a very, like you already saw it in the younger grades. As you start getting into the higher grades, the amount of 5s for online distance is kind of interesting, that how much kids actually like being at home. And when you get into the higher grades, but those kids recognize it's not because they learn better, it's because it's faster and easier. So they like it, but not all for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So they'll still like having a snow day next year when we're back to normal. That's the good news. That's the silver lining.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
Sunday.
Right.
Online learning day.
Yeah.
So this,
And something that was talked about a lot was kids were really dreading going back for like 5 days. Like a really big thing that we kept on hearing about was we would still love like a Wednesday distant learning instead of coming in 2 hours late. So I think that everybody has kind of done pretty well getting used to being in school 5 days a week. I think it's going pretty well. We're already adjusted to it with being in school that many hours compared to so few. So that's been really good too.
I gotta say, I'm one of the kids that like being back at school. It's good to be back. I've really appreciated this last month.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear the differing opinions for sure. Thanks, you guys, for sharing that. Anything else as part of your update tonight? Okay, thank you. Next up is an update from our finance committee. You want to kick us off for this one? I know we met a
Sure
couple of
can.
times. We've had a lot of discussions about a couple of the potential positions, but you want to just give us a quick summary and then we can chime in?
Absolutely. First of all, I want to thank the finance committee, and that's Lisa, Rachel, and Jenny. This is not a real easy process. It's
That's the
always
understatement of the
difficult.
year.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
In
Yeah.
lieu of all that's bad right now with the COVID virus, to add reductions is just a difficult and a challenge. So the task force has met several times. The finance committee has met several times. I want to thank Mary Reeder too, our business manager, who's kind of kept the data for us and kept us organized and provided the information, what cost positions, whatever the case may be. The good news is on this level, we're not reducing or cutting any programs, which is, I think, an ultimate goal to try to maintain our programs and maintain the quality of work that we do within the district to provide a world-class education for our students. But we have looked in some efficiencies that will include some staff members. Majority of that will be done via attrition, where if somebody retires or resigns, we just do a real good hard look at, see if we can be efficient with not filling the position. And we did it again with a combination of some reallocation of some professional development dollars. Those are right now currently needing to be voted on by our teachers group. And so they're facilitating that process and they'll be letting us know. We just want to make sure, I think the leadership of the teachers group wants to make sure that their membership is fully informed before they make the decision to support that fund balance transfer. So that's basically, I think we've gone through a couple of things. It stays a little fluid because people, it's March. So between now and the end of the school year, but the other part is that we have met our target. Our target was approximately $500,000 and we have met it. So I think moving forward, we can just kind of just monitor it and see how we're doing moving forward. So officially on the board will just approve the 2022 budget and it will have those assumptions in there.
So does the approval or not approval of the professional development dollars change that in terms of the $500,000? I can't remember the details. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if we would need that.
We would,
Otherwise, we'd
yeah.
have to go into further reductions.
Sure.
That represents about $150,000 of the 500.
Yep. So we've met it and pending that vote,
Correct.
basically. Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been a lengthy process and I appreciate all the work that you and Mary have put into it. I know it's not, obviously, it's not easy for any of us, but I appreciate all the extra time you've taken to get us comfortable with where we're at in terms of the recommendations that you've made, in terms of where we would take advantage of those attrition positions and things like that, and how that would impact student learning in some situations. So I appreciate the extra time we've spent there. Questions from anyone else who's not on the finance committee or anything else we want to go into there? It's a good process. It's a crappy process, but the process itself was facilitated well. You know what I mean by that. All right, administrative update. Let's talk about the various principal positions that we have to fill.
Yes, we actually, we have posted the elementary school principal position. So we're in the process of recruiting and posting and getting a good diverse field of candidates that could potentially express interest in applying for the position. We will be towards the end of this week, post the intermediate school principal position for those folks that are listening as well. The elementary school principal position is posted because Greg Hinker, who was the assistant principal, agreed to fill in as an interim principal this year, very late. It was mid-August, around that time period. If people don't remember, Darren Schuler was offered the position of superintendent at Watertown Mayor School District, and we worked on a transition plan. So Mr. Hinker always knew coming into this year it was an interim position. We would automatically, like we do with all licensed personnel, all teachers that are licensed, if they're post-July type hires, they're automatically reposted again in the spring, just to make sure we vet out and we've got the deepest and most qualified candidate pool that we can. So we're facilitating that posting process. That'll go over the next 2 weeks, 2 to 2.5 weeks. The intermediate school principal will follow a week later in its process. So we're basically going to narrow down the candidates to about 25 And then they would be invited to take on an online Human X style profiler. It's a leadership profile. It's a questionnaire that they ask, and then we look at that data as further information, looking at all of the application materials, all of the reference materials and the data from the profile, and then we'll narrow it down to 6 to 8 candidates from there that will go to the site team. The site team will, the site-based leadership team and a few other members will be on the site interview committee. And I believe elementary, it's Rachel, Jenny's intermediate. Rachel will be on there as a board member. And then that task will be hopefully a difficult task to narrow down 6 to 8 candidates to 3 finalists that will move to administrative interviews that will include 2 board members. I believe it's Lisa and Corey that are going to be a part of the administrative interviews. And then in the meantime, during that time period, each of the 3 finalists will have about an hour, hour and a half phone call with Human X Ventures, which is an administrative leadership interview. So we'll get the data from that, compile all of that data, eventually look at everything holistically throughout the entire process and make a recommendation to the board at a special meeting in the 2nd week of May for both positions, actually. So I don't need to be redundant with the intermediate school, other than it's going to be about a week behind the elementary school.
Lisa, are you on that panel?
So which final, the administrative or?
Yeah.
The final one?
Yeah.
Am I? I think so.
No.
Is it the admin? It's the admin committee, right?
I think it's Corey and I.
Oh, Lisa, you're not. I'm sorry. Corey and Sue are on that.
Corey and
committee.
Sue. Okay, good.
Lisa, you're on the referendum committee. That's what we
Got it.
decided.
Oh, yeah, okay, okay.
I apologize. Thank you, Corey. Sorry about that, Sue.
Question, I forget, did we do an annual assessment for Greg on, or was that not part of his interim position?
I did an annual evaluation. I did, it wasn't quite the same as
As a
the
normal
intermediate
one.
and the
Yeah,
high
that's what I
school,
thought.
because we knew we were posting automatically, but I did an annual, I'm doing an annual review.
And it's a moot point in terms of this process. This is a start over from scratch. He's going to interview just like everyone else and
Right.
be assessed just like everyone else. Okay.
Yep. Apologies, Sue. Sorry about that. It's a good sign that there's too many committees doing too much work, and I can't keep track of it all. So, but anyways, it's going to be a good process, and I hope that in about a month and a half, I'll be able to bring to you a really good, solid couple of candidates that will meet our needs and our leadership needs as we move forward.
And the goal is for those positions to be on the May approval, right? For the,
Yeah, actually, I'm going
board
to
meeting?
call a special meeting.
Okay.
If you look at that document, they're for both the intermediate and the elementary. I want to make sure that the board acts once we finish the process in a relatively short. So the candidate knows,
Sure.
the finalist does know where they stand and everything's official. So.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to seeing the pool. I know we've talked about this at many times at the board level and with you as well, but I know that we're hoping to get a little diversity in the pool this year. I know it's always challenging sometimes, given where we live. Sometimes it's just the pool is the pool, but I know you're actively recruiting specifically to try to diversify the pool a little bit. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we end up with there.
Yep.
Thank you. All right.
Well, just one more additional, I'm sorry. And
Sure.
again, you will be acting on, I do want to announce, obviously, that Diane Johnson, our longtime community ed director, is going to be retiring. So I will be facilitating another process for that position as well.
Going to be a busy man these next couple months. There's a lot of
We're gonna
big
see
boots
a
to fill here.
Big change in our team, the leadership team,
Yeah.
but it's an excellent opportunity. So
Sure.
looking forward to it.
Okay, and then we've got referendum committee, not part of administrative updates there, but
Yeah,
there's a.
apologize for the unorganized bulleting. I should be back over to the left a little bit more, referendum committee.
Yeah, so we formed a referendum committee since our last meeting in order to try to keep some of the decisions moving forward related to what we needed to get done in between our regular board meetings, or special board meetings, I should say, that we've got scheduled between now and June. And the primary focus of those committee meetings so far has been around the scientific survey that we're facilitating with Baker Tilly to try to get something out to people hopefully in the next few weeks. So on that committee is me and Rachel and Jim. We've only met once and we'll meet again later this week. And again, the focus has just been on kind of fine tuning that survey. Sounds like the first draft we got some good feedback from Baker Tilly, and they'll continue to provide us feedback until we feel like we've got it in a good position to start executing.
Yeah, they're
it.
gonna submit to us before Thursday, their first draft of the questionnaire. I did talk to Don Lifto. He thought that the best way to go forward is to have us meet again
Yep.
sometime Thursday. I think we're gonna try to work on a Thursday morning meeting, go through that and then generate the questions that I can convey back to Don, or then if at a future time we need to pull him back in to give us clarification, we can do that. But he thought we had a good start. He said he was very impressed with the start that we got. That was work with Paul Downer and the members of the referendum committee. So we got a good start. He thinks he can put a good draft together for us to review.
Yep. Any questions from anybody on any of that? Any other committees that we've missed that want to give an update before the meeting? No. All right, then the next item is our long-term facility maintenance resolution.
And this is actually the resolution for the Wright Tech Center. So we'll bring it to the board at the April meeting for your approval of the actual resolution. But each year they are allowed to go to their member districts and ask for a certain dollar amount of money each year to go onto our tax levy for their long-term facility maintenance needs. They've kept it at $167,000 for the last few years. I would anticipate that they may look at increasing that in future years, but this is what they'll be charging, or what we will be charged for FY23, which is $13,309.90. So that is our portion of the $167,000 for Wright Tech. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Any other topics? All right, I will entertain a motion to recess.
Jenny will make that motion.
I'll go ahead and second. Motion by Jenny, second by Lisa. Move to a roll call vote.
Ms. Segwin,
Aye.
Mr. Black,
Hi.
Ms. Roser,
Aye.
Ms. Deppa,
Aye.
Mr. Gearke,
Aye.
Ms. Rosenau,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
All right, we're in recess until 7 o'clock.
So Paul, I can stop the streaming and stop the recording, and then once we come back, I'll turn them both back on.